The universe has boundaries, not of space, which stretches infinite and indifferent, but of possibility. Between dimensions, between realities, there exist membranes thinner than thought, stronger than neutronium. The colonial fleet had mapped star systems, charted nebulae, catalogued worlds across 12 colonies. They understood navigation through the cold mathematics of FTL coordinates and stellar drift, but they had never encountered the edges of reality itself, until desperation forced Commander William Adama to order a jump into coordinates that should not exist. The Battlestar Galactica materialized in a flash of azure light and spatial distortion, her massive hull, over 4,000 feet of gun-gray armor and angular colonial engineering, tumbling through space as her FTL drives screamed in protest. Klaxons wailed through corridors where 50,000 souls had once lived. Now barely 1,400 crew remained, exhausted survivors of a genocide that had reduced humanity's 12 worlds to radioactive cinders. On the command deck, Admiral William Adama gripped his chair as the Battlestar shuddered back into real space. Emergency lighting cast crimson shadows across tactical displays that flickered and recalibrated. His weathered face, lines carved by years of command and recent weeks of impossible choices, remained impassive even as his XO, Colonel Saul Tigh, steadied himself against a console. "Dradius contact," Lieutenant Gaeta called from his station, fingers dancing across controls. "Multiple signatures. Bearing 047 Karam 023, configuration unknown. They're not Cylon." Adama felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks, uncertainty edged with hope rather than dread. Not Cylon meant potential allies, or at least enemies that could be reasoned with. The Cylons, humanity's created children turned genocidal destroyers, had taught him that extinction came without warning, without mercy. "Get me a visual," Adama ordered, his voice carrying the calm authority that had held his crew together through the end of their world. The main view screen flickered to life, and what it revealed made even the battle-hardened admiral lean forward. A vessel unlike anything in colonial records hung in the darkness, a graceful engineering marvel with a saucer-shaped primary hull connected by a slender neck to twin cylindrical nacelles that glowed with barely contained energy. The ship was smaller than Galactica, perhaps a quarter her mass, but radiated technological sophistication that made colonial military hardware look brutalist by comparison. "Gods," Tigh muttered, squinting at the elegant starship. "What the hell is that?" "Whatever it is," Adama replied. "They've seen us. Weapons status." "All gun batteries operational, Admiral," Lieutenant Douala reported from Tactical. "Point defense systems ready. Vipers are being prepped in the launch tubes, but we've only got 47 birds flight ready after that last Cylon engagement." Adama nodded. Galactica had jumped blind into these coordinates, a calculated risk when Cylon-based stars had been converging on their position, when fuel reserves were critical, when the civilian fleet trailing behind them needed time to complete their own jumps. He'd gambled everything on coordinates extrapolated from corrupted nav data recovered from the refugee ship Adriatic, data that suggested a star system, a chance at resources, maybe even sanctuary. Instead, they'd found this. "Sir, we're being hailed," Lieutenant Douala announced, her hand pressing against her headset. "Audio only. They're speaking Admiral. They're speaking Colonial Standard, or something very close to it." The bridge fell silent. Speaking their language meant either an impossible coincidence or something far more complex. In Adama's experience, coincidence was just another word for trap. "Put it through," he commanded. The voice that filled the CIC was male, measured, carrying an undertone of curiosity rather than hostility. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain James T. Kirk of the United Federation of Planets Starship Enterprise. You've entered Federation space through what appears to be a spatial anomaly. We're reading significant damage to your ship and unusual energy signatures. Do you require assistance?" Adama exchanged glances with Ty. The offer seemed genuine, but weeks of running from an enemy that looked human, sounded human, felt human, until they murdered billions had taught him paranoia. "This is Admiral William Adama, Commanding Officer of the Battlestar Galactica, Colonial Fleet. We are not from your Federation. Our arrival was unintentional." He paused, weighing how much to reveal. "We are refugees fleeing hostile forces. We mean no harm to your people, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." A different voice cut across the channel, logical, precise, touched with barely perceptible curiosity. "Admiral, I am Commander Spock, Enterprise First Officer. Our sensors indicate your vessel utilizes technology significantly different from Federation standard. The spatial rift through which you emerged has destabilized. We recommend immediate coordination to ensure neither of our vessels is damaged by secondary effects." Ty leaned close to Adama. Could be a trick. Get us talking while they position for attack. Or genuine concern, Adama countered quietly. He'd commanded long enough to read tone and intention. These people, whoever they were, didn't sound like Cylons. Cylons were efficient, cold, certain. These voices carried warmth, protocol, even humor beneath the formality. "Captain Kirk," Adama replied, "we accept your offer of coordination. But understand, my ship has full operational capability, and my crew has recently survived circumstances that have made us cautious of strangers." "Understood, Admiral." Kirk's tone shifted, becoming less formal, more personal. "We've encountered our share of impossible situations out here. How about we meet face to face? I'd prefer to have this conversation without weapons pointed at each other. My ship or yours, your choice." It was a test, Adama realized, a measure of trust. If he insisted on hosting, it suggested paranoia or weakness. If he agreed to board their vessel, it showed willingness to extend faith, despite his admitted caution. "We'll receive you aboard, Galactica," Adama decided. "Fair warning, Captain. We've been through combat recently. My ship isn't pretty." "Neither is mine after a few scrapes, Admiral. We'll transport over if that's acceptable, or use a shuttlecraft if you prefer." "Transport?" Ty asked under his breath. Adama caught the confusion in his XO's voice. "Shuttlecraft will be fine, Captain. We'll transmit landing coordinates. Admiral Adama out." The channel closed. Immediately, the CIC erupted in controlled chaos as department heads demanded explanations, as Gaeta tried analyzing the alien vessel's energy signatures, as Duwala coordinated with the flight deck to clear a landing bay. Adama stood, straightening his uniform jacket. "Colonel Ty, you have the deck. Lieutenant Duwala, assemble an honor guard, armed, but not overtly threatening. Gaeta, I want every scanner focused on that ship. If they so much as charge a weapon, I want to know before they finish the thought." "Sir," Gaeta acknowledged. already working his console with practiced efficiency. "And someone wake up President Roslin," Adama added. "She'll want to be part of this conversation." As he strode toward the exit, Ty called after him, "Bill, be careful. We don't know these people." Adama paused at the hatch. "We don't know anything anymore, Saul. Our worlds are gone. Our families are dead. We're in a region of space we can't even identify." He turned, meeting his oldest friend's eyes. "Right now, careful is a luxury we can't afford. We need allies, information, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to stop running." The flight deck of Battlestar Galactica was organized chaos incarnate. Deck crews in yellow jumpsuits scrambled around Viper fighters, locked in launch tubes, while mechanics welded damage patches onto birds that had taken Cylon fire in the last engagement. The smell of hydraulic fluid, welding sparks, and recycled air hung thick as Admiral Adama descended the metal stairway to the main deck. Chief Galen Tyrol, Galactica's chief petty officer, and a man who understood the Battlestar's systems better than anyone, stood near the designated landing zone, watching his crews clear debris. He caught sight of Adama and crossed the deck, wiping grease-stained hands on his coveralls. "Admiral, we've got the area prepped for their shuttle. Helo's standing by with a damage control team in case their landing is rough." "Good thinking, Chief." Adama surveyed the deck. Despite weeks of continuous operation, despite losses that would have broken lesser crews, his people maintained discipline. Vipers sat ready for launch. Ammunition was stacked and secured. The deck crews might be exhausted, but they were professionals. "Sir, if I may." Tyrol's expression showed concern. "The crew's on edge. Rumors are already spreading. New contact, unknown ship, possible Cylons. Some of the deckhands are wondering if we jumped into another ambush." "Then make sure they hear the truth, Chief. These people aren't Cylons. They're something else entirely, possibly something that can help us." President Laura Roslin arrived moments later, flanked by her aide Billy Kikea. The former Secretary of Education, thrust into presidency when everyone above her in succession died in nuclear fire, had aged years in weeks, but her eyes remained sharp, her bearing resolute. "Admiral," she greeted, voice carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who had signed off on rationing plans that morning, knowing people would go hungry. "I hope you have good news. The civilian fleet is running on fumes, literally and figuratively." "We have contact, Madam President. Unknown, but potentially friendly." "Potentially," Roslin repeated, the word weighted with all the caution recent experience demanded. "How confident are you?" Before Adama could answer, Duala's voice crackled over the deck speakers. "Admiral, incoming craft detected. Small vessel, no weapons signatures. They're requesting final approach clearance." "Grant it," Adama ordered. Every eye on the deck turned upward as the atmospheric containment field shimmered. Through the blue energy barrier, a craft descended that made even hardened colonial warriors pause in wonder. It was smaller than a raptor, sleeker, with graceful lines, and what appeared to be no visible means of propulsion beyond the gentle hum of impulse engines. The shuttlecraft, for that's clearly what it was, settled onto the deck with barely a whisper, its landing struts extending with mechanical precision. The name Galileo was stenciled on the hull beneath an emblem, a stylized arrowhead surrounding stars. The craft's hatch hissed open, and 3 figures emerged. The first was a man in his mid-30s, athletic build, wearing a gold tunic with black pants and boots. His bearing screamed command officer, and his eyes, intelligent, assessing, touched with carefully controlled curiosity, swept the flight deck before settling on Adama. Captain James Kirk, without question. Beside him stood a figure that made several colonial warriors reach instinctively for sidearms before discipline reasserted itself. Tall, lean, with swept-back eyebrows and distinctly pointed ears. His features were humanoid, but clearly not human. He wore a blue science officer's tunic and regarded the assembled colonials with an expression of studied neutrality that somehow conveyed volumes about his analytical process. Commander Spock, the logical voice from earlier. The third member of their party was a man in red medical colors, older, with sharp features, and an expression that suggested he'd seen too much suffering and refused to become numb to it. He carried a medical tricorder and scanned the environment with the practiced wariness of someone accustomed to unknown situations. Kirk stepped forward, and Adama moved to meet him. For a moment, two commanders from impossibly different worlds stood face to face on a flight deck that still smelled of cordite and desperation. Kirk extended his hand, a gesture Adama recognized despite everything. Admiral Adama, thank you for receiving us. I'm Captain James Kirk. This is my first officer, Commander Spock, and our chief medical officer, Dr. Leonard McCoy. Adama took the offered hand. Kirk's grip was firm, honest. Captain, welcome aboard the Battlestar Galactica. This is President Laura Roslin, leader of our civilian government. Kirk's eyebrows rose slightly at President, but he adapted smoothly, extending the same courtesy to Roslin. Madam President, it's an honor. Captain Kirk, Roslin acknowledged. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Most first contacts are complicated, Kirk replied with a slight smile. We've had our share of unusual arrivals, though I'll admit, a Battlestar appearing through a spatial rift is a new one. McCoy had been scanning the area with his tricorder, frowning at the readings. Jim, I'm picking up elevated stress hormones across the crew, signs of sustained fatigue, and, Lord in heaven, these people are malnourished. Doctor, Adama said sharply, my crew is combat-ready and fully capable. I don't doubt their capability, Admiral, McCoy replied, his tone professional but concerned. I'm a doctor. I see suffering. These readings suggest your people have been through sustained trauma. The flight deck had gone very quiet. Colonial warriors who'd survived nuclear apocalypse, who'd watched their families die, who'd fought Cylons across a dozen engagements, stood motionless as these strangers, these impossibly advanced strangers, casually discussed their condition, like medical specimens. Spock stepped forward, diffusing the tension with pure logic. Admiral, our sensors have analyzed the spatial anomaly through which you arrived. It appears to be a dimensional rift, a tear in the fabric of space-time connecting your universe of origin to ours. The energy signatures suggest the rift was not naturally occurring, but rather induced by your vessel's propulsion system under extreme duress. You're saying we punched through from another dimension? Ty demanded, from behind Adama, skepticism heavy in his voice. That is the most logical explanation for your arrival, Colonel, Spock confirmed. Your technology operates on principles fundamentally different from Federation standard. The energy matrix of your FTL drive created a resonance cascade that, under specific circumstances, allowed trans-universal passage. Adama processed this. Different dimension, different universe. Possibly a universe where the Cylons didn't exist, where the 12 colonies had never fallen, where humanity wasn't reduced to a ragtag fugitive fleet, or possibly a universe with its own horrors waiting to be discovered. "Captain Kirk," Adama said carefully, "you mentioned the Federation. What exactly is that?" Kirk's expression shifted, surprised that they didn't know. Then understanding. The United Federation of Planets, a union of over 150 worlds dedicated to peaceful exploration, scientific advancement, and mutual defense. We're explorers, Admiral, not conquerors. The Enterprise is on a 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations. He paused, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Something in Kirk's tone, idealism tempered by experience, hope that had survived disappointment, resonated with Adama in ways he hadn't expected. This man believed what he was saying, believed in exploration, in peace, in the possibility of something better than endless war. It was almost painful to witness such optimism. "Captain," Roslin interjected, her political instincts recognizing an opening. "Admiral Adama mentioned we're refugees. That's understating our situation." She took a breath. 3 weeks ago, our worlds, all 12 colonial worlds of humanity, were destroyed in a coordinated nuclear attack. Billions died in hours. We are what remains. Approximately 45,000 survivors, fleeing in a fleet of civilian ships, protected by this single military vessel. We are searching for a planet called Earth, which according to our religious texts is humanity's 13th colony. The 3 Starfleet officers exchanged glances. McCoy looked horrified. Spock's expression remained neutral, but his eyes showed something that might have been sympathy. Kirk's jaw tightened, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who understood loss. "Admiral, Madam President, I'm sorry. I can't imagine what you've been through." "You don't have to imagine, Captain," Adama replied. "You just have to decide if you're willing to help a fleet of refugees who've appeared in your space without invitation, carrying technology you don't understand, pursued by an enemy that won't stop until every last human is dead." "Pursued?" Spock inquired, one eyebrow rising. "You indicated hostile forces. Are they capable of following you through the dimensional rift?" Adama's expression darkened. "The Cylons are machines, artificial intelligences created by humanity to serve us. 40 years ago, they rebelled. We fought a war, established an armistice, and they vanished beyond our space. We thought it was over. We were wrong. They evolved, infiltrated our society with models that look human, and then they struck. They won't stop because they believe humanity's destruction is righteous, necessary, their divine purpose." "Artificial intelligence with religious motivation," McCoy muttered. "That's a new nightmare." Kirk's expression had shifted from diplomatic curiosity to tactical assessment. "Admiral, if these Cylons followed you here..." The alert klaxon screamed across the flight deck, and Duala's voice crackled with sudden urgency. "Admiral, Dradis contacts, multiple signatures emerging through spatial anomaly, bearing 270 Karam 45. Configuration matches Cylon base star. They followed us through." Adama's blood ran cold. Impossible. The rift should have collapsed. The jump should have separated them. But the Cylons had always been too smart, too adaptable, too willing to sacrifice their own resources to complete humanity's extinction. "Captain Kirk," Adama said, his voice cutting through the sudden chaos as colonial warriors sprinted to battle stations. "I'm afraid your first contact just became significantly more complicated. The Cylons are here. And they don't negotiate." Kirk's hand moved to the communicator on his belt. "Kirk to Enterprise. Spock, McCoy, and I are aboard the colonial vessel. Unknown hostiles emerging through the spatial anomaly. Red alert. Shields up. But hold fire until my command." "Acknowledged, Captain," came the response from a younger voice. "Mr. Sulu has laid in evasive maneuvers." Adama was already moving toward the exit, but he paused long enough to look back at Kirk. "Captain, I suggest you return to your ship. What's about to happen isn't going to be pretty." Kirk's jaw set with determination. "With respect, Admiral, my crew and I don't run from a fight. If you're facing an enemy, then so are we. That's what explorers do. We stand with those who need us." For the first time in weeks, Adama felt something unexpected. Not hope, but its precursor. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, humanity's refugees weren't alone anymore. "Then, welcome to the war, Captain," Adama said. "Let's see if your Federation is ready for what's coming." The klaxons wailed, Vipers launched from tubes, and the Battlestar Galactica prepared for battle alongside a starship from a universe that believed in peaceful exploration. The Cylons were about to teach the Federation that some conflicts allowed no room for idealism. If you want to see more crossover stories bringing different universes together in epic clashes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character or ship you'd want to see next in the comments below. May the best of both universes guide us forward. The Combat Information Center of Battlestar Galactica transformed into controlled chaos as Admiral Adama burst through the hatch, Captain Kirk and his officers following close behind. The command deck, a two-tiered nerve center of tactical displays, communications stations, and strategic plotting tables, blazed with crimson alert lighting as officers coordinated the Battlestar's response to the emerging threat. Colonel Tiai stood at the tactical table, hands braced against the illuminated surface, showing DRADIS contacts multiplying across the display. 2 base stars confirmed, Admiral. They're holding position at the rift coordinates, launching raiders. Heavy contingent. I'm counting at least 60 contacts inbound. "Launch all Vipers," Adama ordered, moving to his command position with the practiced efficiency of decades of military service. "Get the civilian fleet jumping immediately. Coordinates from the archive. Anywhere but here. We'll hold the line until they're clear." "Sir, the civilian ships are low on fuel," Duala reported from communications, her voice tight with stress. "Several ships are reporting they can't make a full jump without. Then they make partial jumps." Adama cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. "Jump short if necessary, but get them away from this battle space. Transmit rendezvous coordinates on emergency channels. Move, Lieutenant." Captain Kirk had positioned himself at the edge of the command deck, observing the colonial military machine shift into combat readiness with evident fascination and growing concern. His communicator chirped, and he flipped it open. "Kirk here. Captain, this is Sulu. The unknown vessels match the configuration Admiral Adama described. 2 large craft approximately twice the mass of a Constitution-class starship, launching smaller attack craft. They're ignoring our hails and moving into attack posture. Spock had moved to one of the auxiliary stations, his fingers dancing across colonial controls with surprising ease despite their unfamiliar design. Fascinating. The colonial tactical systems operate on principles similar to our own, albeit with significantly different interface protocols. Captain, I am detecting unusual energy signatures from the hostile vessels. They appear to be networked in a manner suggesting shared computational resources. They're machines, Commander, Adama said, without looking away from his tactical display. Cylon-based stars don't have individual crew. Each ship is a single networked intelligence, coordinating thousands of Centurions, hundreds of raiders, and multiple humanoid infiltrators. They think faster than we do, react faster, adapt faster. Our only advantage is that we're unpredictable. We make mistakes they can't always anticipate. Dr. McCoy had found himself pressed against a bulkhead, medical tricorder forgotten, as he watched the coordination unfolding around him. Jim, we can't just stand here, watching people prepare to die. The Enterprise has firepower. And the Prime Directive, Spock interjected quietly. Doctor, our regulations strictly prohibit interference in the internal affairs of civilizations. However, he paused, one eyebrow rising in that characteristic expression of logical consideration. These hostile forces do not appear to be from this universe, and they pose a direct threat to Federation space. The parameters may warrant tactical flexibility. Kirk's expression hardened with decision. Mr. Spock, I'd say machines committing genocide and pursuing refugees through dimensional rifts pretty clearly violates any reasonable interpretation of non-interference. Kirk to Enterprise, Mr. Sulu, bring us about to defensive position alongside the colonial vessel. Shields at maximum. Arm photon torpedoes, but hold fire until I give the command. Aye, Captain. Sulu's voice crackled back. Coming about now. On the main view screen, a massive display dominating the forward bulkhead of the CIC, the graceful shape of the USS Enterprise moved into formation with Galactica. The starship's shields shimmered into visibility as they reached full power, creating a luminescent envelope around the vessel. Compared to Galactica's angular, gunmetal brutalism, the Enterprise looked almost delicate. But Kirk knew his ship carried weapons that could reduce planets to cinders. The question was whether those weapons would be enough against an enemy that had already exterminated billions. Admiral, Lieutenant Gaeta called from his sensor station, his young face tight with concentration. Raiders are breaking into attack formation. 20 seconds to weapons range. Launch tubes report all Vipers away. We've got 43 birds in the black, forming defensive screen. All batteries, free fire when the Raiders enter range, Adama commanded. Target the base stars with our main guns. I want those ships bleeding atmosphere before they can launch their next wave. Ty moved beside Adama, speaking quietly enough that only his old friend could hear. Bill, these Federation people, can they actually fight? Their ship looks like it was designed by artists, not engineers. We're about to find out, Saul, Adama replied, then louder, addressing Kirk directly. Captain, my gunners are going to put a lot of ordnance in space. I'd appreciate if your ship doesn't get caught in the crossfire. Kirk smiled. a tight, combat-ready expression that reminded Adama of fighter pilots before a mission. "Admiral, the Enterprise has faced down Klingon battlecruisers, Romulan warbirds, and more spatial anomalies than I care to count. We can handle ourselves." "Captain," Spock said from his borrowed station, his tone carrying subtle urgency, "I am detecting energy buildups from the hostile vessels, consistent with directed energy weapon systems. They are preparing to fire." The view screen erupted in violence as the two Cylon base stars opened up with their primary batteries. Unlike the elegant phaser beams of Federation technology, or even the kinetic rounds of colonial railguns, Cylon weapons manifested as streams of superheated plasma that carved through space like molten whips. The first volley hammered into Galactica's armored hull, and the entire Battlestar shuddered under the impact. "Armor breaches on decks 7 and 12, Duala reported, as damage control alerts screamed across the CIC. "Compartments sealed, no casualties reported yet." "Return fire," Adama commanded. Galactica's main batteries, massive railgun turrets that could hurl tungsten slugs at relativistic velocities, roared to life. The kinetic rounds crossed the distance to the nearest base star in seconds, slamming into the Y-shaped Cylon vessel with devastating force. Armor plating exploded outward as the slugs punched through, venting atmosphere and debris. But the base star didn't slow. Didn't retreat, just kept coming, already launching its second wave of raiders while returning fire with mechanical precision. "Jim, look at that," McCoy breathed, pointing at the view screen where Vipers and raiders tangled in a deadly ballet. The colonial fighters, stubby, aggressive craft that looked more like flying gun platforms than elegant spacecraft, dove and weaved through waves of Cylon raiders with desperate skill. The raiders themselves were sleek, organic-looking craft that moved with unsettling fluidity, as if they were living things rather than machines. Kirk watched as a Viper pilot, callsign Starbuck, according to the identification transponders Spock had isolated, executed a maneuver that seemed to violate basic physics, spinning her craft through a raider's formation and destroying two with perfectly placed gunfire before accelerating away. "Those pilots are incredible." "They're survivors," Adama said, his voice carrying equal parts pride and grief. "Every pilot in that formation has fought Cylons for weeks straight. They've watched friends die, watched their worlds burn. They fly because if they don't, the civilian fleet, the last remnant of humanity, dies with them." A raider broke through the defensive screen, streaking toward Galactica with clear intent. Before Colonial Point Defense could acquire the target, a brilliant ruby beam lanced out from the Enterprise, catching the Cylon fighter midship. The raider simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the precision of Federation phaser technology. "Direct hit," Sulu reported over the comm channel, satisfaction evident in his voice. "These things don't have shields. They're sitting ducks for phaser fire." "Mr. Sulu, concentrate fire on the fighter craft," Kirk ordered. "Take the pressure off the colonial pilots. Let Galactica's guns handle the capital ships." What followed was a demonstration of two radically different military doctrines, finding common ground through sheer necessity. Galactica acted as the anvil, her massive hull absorbing punishment, while her railguns hammered the base stars with kinetic fury. The Enterprise became the scalpel, her phasers and photon torpedoes picking off raiders with surgical precision, her shields deflecting return fire that would have crippled colonial fighters. Spock had fully integrated himself into Galactica's sensor network, feeding tactical data to Kirk while simultaneously analyzing Cylon behavior patterns. Captain, the hostile vessels employ a distributed intelligence architecture. Each fighter craft appears to be semi-autonomous, but networked to the capital ships. If we could disrupt that network, they'd lose coordination. Kirk finished. Admiral, do your people have any kind of electronic warfare capability? Adama's expression showed grim satisfaction. We've been jamming Cylon communications since the first week of the war. Doesn't stop them, but it slows them down. Gaeta, initiate ECM protocols, maximum power. See if we can blind those beta stars. Aye, sir, Gaeta acknowledged, his fingers flying across his console. Activating jamming suite now. Across the electromagnetic spectrum, Galactica began broadcasting chaos. White noise, false signals, and mimicked Cylon command frequencies designed to sow confusion. The effect was immediate. Raiders began executing contradictory maneuvers, their formation cohesion degrading as the network struggled to maintain coherence through the interference. It's working, Ty observed, watching the tactical display. They're starting to lose their edge. But the base stars adapted with terrifying speed. Within seconds, new frequencies emerged. The network restructured itself, and the raiders resumed coordinated assault. Worse, one of the base stars began moving directly toward Galactica, ignoring the punishment from her main guns, clearly intent on bringing its full arsenal to bear at point-blank range. That base star's on a ramming course, Gaeta warned. Impact in 90 seconds at current acceleration. Kirk didn't hesitate. Kirk to Enterprise, target that base star with all forward photon torpedoes, full spread, fire on my mark. Captain, Spock said carefully, a full torpedo spread at this range may damage both hostile vessels and severely tax our shield generators. Noted, Mr. Spock. Kirk to Enterprise, fire. 6 photon torpedoes, antimatter weapons that released energy equivalent to hundreds of megatons each, streaked from the Enterprise's forward launchers. They crossed the distance to the advancing base star in heartbeats. And when they detonated against its hull, the results were catastrophic. The Y-shaped Cylon vessel's entire forward section disintegrated in an expanding sphere of plasma and debris. Secondary explosions rippled through its structure as internal systems overloaded. The base star didn't die quickly. Cylon vessels were too compartmentalized, too redundant for that. But it began tumbling, venting atmosphere and smaller craft, its weapons falling silent as whatever passed for its consciousness struggled to maintain cohesion. Direct hit. Sulu's voice carried excitement. That base star is dead in space, Captain. But victory came with a price. The second base star, recognizing the threat posed by the Federation starship, redirected its full attention to the Enterprise. Plasma weapons raked across her shields, and Kirk could hear the strain in his chief engineer's voice over the comm. Captain, this is Scotty. These energy weapons are unlike anything we've faced. They're degrading our shield harmonics faster than I can compensate. Reroute power from non-essential systems, Kirk ordered. Hold those shields. Adama watched the exchange, recognizing something in Kirk's command style, a willingness to adapt, to trust his crew, to make decisions that balanced tactical necessity with the lives under his command. It was the mark of a true commander, regardless of what universe he came from. "Admiral," Adama said, making a decision. "We need to take that second base star out before it cripples Kirk's ship. Prepare for emergency jump. Micro jump to point-blank range with the target." Ty's head snapped around. "Bill, that's insane. We've never attempted a combat jump that precise. If our calculations are off by even a fraction, then we die," Adama finished flatly. "But if we don't do something, the Enterprise goes down, and we lose the only ally we've found in this universe. Calculate the jump, Colonel. We're going in close." The tension in the CIC ratcheted up as Gaeta worked frantically at his navigation console, calculating coordinates for a jump that would place Galactica within kilometers of the base's star, close enough that the Battlestar's main guns couldn't possibly miss, close enough that any error in targeting would result in mutual destruction. "Coordinates laid in," Gaeta reported, his voice steady despite the impossibility of what they were attempting. "Jump solution ready. Admiral, I should mention, the margin of error on this is irrelevant." "Lieutenant," Adama interrupted. "Helm, execute jump on my mark. All gun batteries, prepare to fire the instant we exit FTL. Target all weapons on that base star. We'll only get one chance at this." Kirk had been listening, and understanding dawned in his expression. "Admiral, you're going to jump your ship into point-blank range. That's desperate, reckless, and absolutely necessary," Adama finished. He met Kirk's eyes across the CIC. "Captain, when we jump, your ship will have approximately 30 seconds before that base star realizes what happened and turns its attention back to you. I suggest you use that time wisely." Kirk's expression shifted to something approaching respect. "Understood, Admiral." Kirk to Enterprise. "Stand by for tactical opportunity. When Galactica jumps, concentrate all fire on the base star's propulsion systems. I want that ship crippled." "Helm," Adama commanded, his voice cutting through the organized chaos of the CIC. "Execute jump." For a fraction of a second, reality bent. The fundamental forces that held matter together strained as Galactica's FTL drive tore a hole through space-time, translated the massive Battlestar's mass across distance that should have required minutes to traverse, and deposited her precisely where Gaeta's calculations predicted. Less than 5 kilometers from the Cylon base star's starboard flank. The Cylons, for all their computational superiority, couldn't adapt quickly enough. For one critical heartbeat, they were still targeting the Enterprise, still coordinating raiders, still processing the unexpected maneuver. That heartbeat was all Galactica needed. "Fire!" Adama roared. Every gun battery on Galactica's starboard side, railguns, point defense cannons, missile tubes, unleashed hell at point-blank range. Tungsten slugs punched through Cylon armor like tissue paper. Missiles detonated against already compromised sections, their shaped charges tearing into critical systems. The base star's Y-shaped structure began coming apart under the onslaught, entire sections breaking away as internal explosions cascaded through its network. Simultaneously, the Enterprise added her firepower to the assault. Phaser beams carved through the base star's propulsion section, severing the massive engines from the main structure. Photon torpedoes hammered the vessel's center mass, each detonation sending shock waves through the dying Cylon ship. The base star tried to return fire, its remaining weapons tracking toward Galactica with mechanical determination. A few plasma bolts struck home, scoring the Battlestar's armor, causing damage control alerts to scream across the CIC. But it was too late. The Cylon vessel was dying, its network fragmenting, its consciousness scattering like smoke in a hurricane. Battlestar is breaking apart, Gaeta reported, watching his sensors. I'm reading catastrophic systems failures across all sections. She's done. But even in death, the Cylons refuse to yield. The remaining raiders, now cut off from their networked command structure, didn't retreat or surrender. Instead, they pressed their attack with suicidal determination, throwing themselves at Vipers and the Enterprise with mechanical fury. They're going berserk, Ty observed, without the Battlestar network to coordinate them. They're just attacking anything that moves. Vipers, break and engage, Adama ordered. Take them down. Don't give them a chance to regroup. What followed was a brutal close-quarters engagement as colonial pilots, exhausted, running low on ammunition, flying birds held together by spare parts and prayers, systematically destroyed the remaining raiders. The Enterprise provided covering fire, her phasers swatting Cylon fighters from space with methodical precision. Captain Apollo, Galactica's CAG and Admiral Adama's son, led the final push, his Viper screaming through the debris field of the destroyed Battlestars to gun down the last 3 raiders in a display of flying that bordered on the supernatural. His voice crackled over the comm, breathless but triumphant. Galactica, Apollo, all raiders destroyed, threat neutralized. We're coming home. The CIC erupted in cheers, exhausted, relieved, desperate celebration from people who'd been certain they were about to die. Again. Adama allowed himself a moment to close his eyes, to breathe, to feel the weight of command lighten infinitesimally. But only a moment. Damage report, he ordered, bringing the CIC back to focus. Multiple armor breaches, several compartments venting atmosphere, Duala reported. Casualties are light, 7 wounded, no confirmed fatalities. Damage control teams are responding. We'll need time in dock for proper repairs, but we're still combat capable. Captain Kirk, Adama said, turning to the Federation officer who'd stood shoulder to shoulder with them through the entire engagement. Status of your ship? Kirk had his communicator open, listening to reports from his bridge crew. Shields are down to 23%. We've taken some hull damage, and Scotty is expressing his displeasure in colorful Scottish terminology. But we're intact. No casualties. Thank you, Captain, Adama said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Without your ship's intervention, we wouldn't have survived that engagement. You saved lives today, colonial lives. That's a debt we won't forget. Kirk stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His expression had shifted from the tactical focus of combat to something more personal, more genuinely troubled. Admiral, Dr. McCoy was right earlier. Your people are exhausted, malnourished, running on fumes. That battle... He gestured at the view screen, where Vipers were limping back to Galactica's flight deck. Your pilots fought like demons, but I could see it in their maneuvers. They're reaching their limits. We reach our limits every day, Captain, Adama replied quietly, and every day we push past them, because the alternative is extinction. Spock had completed his analysis of the battle, and he approached with his characteristic calm. Admiral, I have compiled tactical data from the engagement. The hostile artificial intelligences employ sophisticated combat algorithms, but demonstrate exploitable behavioral patterns. With proper coordination between Colonial and Federation forces, defensive capabilities could be significantly enhanced. Mr. Spock. President Rosalind's voice cut through the conversation as she emerged from where she'd been standing against the bulkhead throughout the battle. Are you suggesting an ongoing military alliance? The Vulcan raised one eyebrow. I am suggesting, Madam President, that pragmatic cooperation would benefit both parties. Your fleet possesses combat experience and tactical flexibility. The Federation possesses technological resources and, relevant to your immediate situation, the capacity to provide humanitarian assistance. Dr. McCoy stepped forward, his medical tricorder still registering data from the Colonial crew around him. Admiral, Madam President, I'm a doctor, not a politician, but I've seen war. I've treated casualties from conflicts across half the quadrant. What I'm reading from your people, the malnutrition, the stress hormones, the signs of sustained trauma, these aren't sustainable. Your crew, your civilians, they need more than tactical victories. They need food, medicine, rest. Adama and Rosalind exchanged glances, a silent communication born of weeks of shared crisis management. They discussed this scenario in theory. What would they do if they encountered a civilization capable of helping them? What price would they pay? What compromises would they accept? Doctor, Rosalind said carefully, the Colonial fleet has approximately 45,000 survivors spread across 62 civilian ships. We're rationing food, water, and medicine. Our fuel reserves are critical. Every jump brings us closer to the point where some ships simply won't be able to follow. If your Federation can help. She paused, and for the first time, Adama saw the full weight of her burden show in her expression. If you can help, we'll find a way to repay that debt, but we won't become dependent. We won't trade one form of extinction for another. Kirk's expression showed understanding. Madam President, the Federation doesn't trade in debts or dependencies. We're explorers, humanitarians. We help because it's the right thing to do. Starfleet Command will need to be informed, and there are protocols that will need to be navigated. But I give you my word, we won't abandon you. Captain, Adama said, the Cylons will be back. That rift is still open, and they have resources we can only guess at. If your Federation helps us, you'll be drawing their attention. They won't stop just because you destroyed 2 base stars. They'll send more. They'll adapt. They'll find ways to hurt you. Kirk's jaw set with determination. Then we'll adapt too, Admiral. Besides, he glanced at Spock and McCoy, then back to Adama with something that might have been a smile. The Enterprise has dealt with its share of impossible odds. We're still here. The moment was interrupted by Gaeta's urgent call. Admiral, I'm detecting instability in the spatial rift. The energy matrix is collapsing. It looks like the destruction of the base stars destabilized the dimensional boundary. On the view screen, the rift that had brought both Colonial and Cylon forces to this universe began contracting, its edges flickering with exotic radiation as space-time reasserted its normal configuration. The rift is closing, Spock confirmed, studying the sensor data. Within approximately 3.7 minutes, the dimensional passage will cease to exist. Any further incursion from the colonial universe will be impossible unless the specific conditions that created the rift are precisely recreated. Adama felt something unexpected. Hope. So the Cylons can't follow us anymore. We're cut off from our universe, but so are they. For the moment, yes, Spock agreed. However, I would caution against assuming permanent safety. If the Cylons possess sufficient understanding of dimensional physics, they'll find another way through, Ty finished grimly. They always do. Then we prepare for that possibility, Kirk said. In the meantime, we have more immediate concerns. Admiral, your fleet needs resupply. Your people need medical attention. And Starfleet Command needs to be briefed on everything that's happened. I'm going to recommend we escort your fleet to Starbase 12. It's the nearest Federation facility with the resources to help. And if your command refuses, Roslin asked, political instincts recognizing the complexity of the situation. Kirk's expression showed absolute certainty. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. But right now, I'm the ranking Starfleet officer in this sector, and I'm making the tactical decision that the colonial fleet is under Federation protection. Let the admirals argue about it later. Adama studied Kirk for a long moment. This young captain who commanded a ship of explorers but fought like a warrior when necessary, who offered help without demanding servitude, who seemed to genuinely believe in the ideals he spoke about. It was almost alien after weeks of nothing but Cylon treachery and human desperation. Captain Kirk, Adama said formally, on behalf of the colonial fleet, we accept your offer of escort and assistance, with the understanding that we remain an independent entity and that we'll continue our search for Earth. Understood, Admiral, Kirk replied. Though I should mention, we have records of a planet called Earth. It might not be the same one your people are searching for, but it exists. It's the homeworld of humanity in this universe. The CIC fell absolutely silent. Every colonial officer, every crew member within earshot, froze. Earth. Not a myth, not a religious promise, but a real planet with coordinates and a location. Roslin's voice trembled slightly when she spoke. Captain, are you saying Earth actually exists? That it's not just legend? It exists, Madam President, Spock confirmed. A Class M planet in what we designate the Sol system. It is the birthplace of humanity and the capital world of the United Federation of Planets, current population approximately 5 billion. Adama had to sit down. After weeks of running, of fighting, of leading his people through impossible darkness toward a destination that might not even exist, to hear that Earth was real, that it was inhabited, thriving, that humanity had built something enduring there, it was almost too much to process. Admiral, Ty asked quietly, concern in his voice. I'm fine, Sol, Adama replied, though his hands were shaking slightly. Just processing. He looked up at Kirk, at Spock, at McCoy. Your Earth. Would they accept refugees? 45,000 people who've lost everything. Kirk's expression softened. Admiral, I can't make promises on behalf of Earth's government or the Federation Council, but I know my people. We've been where you are, facing extinction, fighting for survival, hoping for a better future. We remember what it cost to build the Federation. We won't turn away people in need. The communicator on Kirk's belt chirped, and Sulu's voice came through. Captain, We're receiving a transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Comac is demanding a full report on the spatial anomaly and the unknown vessels in this sector." Kirk and Adama exchanged knowing looks, the look of commanders who understood that bureaucracy and military hierarchy were about to make their lives complicated. "Tell the Admiral I'll provide a full briefing in 1 hour," Kirk replied, "and that we have first contact protocols to observe with a refugee population." "Aye, Captain." Adama stood, straightening his uniform. "Captain, I imagine you'll need time to prepare that briefing and coordinate with your superiors. In the meantime, I need to address my fleet. They've just watched us fight alongside an alien starship, and they deserve to know what happens next." "Agreed," Kirk said. "We'll coordinate through standard frequencies. And, Admiral," he extended his hand again, "welcome to the Federation universe. I have a feeling this is the beginning of something significant." Adama took the offered hand, and for the first time in weeks, allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the desperate flight through darkness was approaching something that resembled a destination. Behind them, through the viewports of the CIC, the spatial rift collapsed in a final burst of exotic radiation, sealing off the universe where the 12 colonies had died. The colonial fleet was cut off from everything they'd known, stranded in a dimension that operated by different rules. But they were alive. They had allies, and somewhere in this strange new universe, Earth waited. The war wasn't over. The Cylons would find them again, eventually. Machines were patient, persistent, and utterly implacable in their purpose. But today, humanity had won. And for people who'd watched their worlds burn, who'd lost everything but each other and their hope, that victory meant everything. Starbase 12 hung in the darkness of space like a monument to Federation ingenuity, a massive orbital facility that combined military installation, shipyard, and civilian hub into a single sprawling structure. Its primary docking arms extended like spokes from a central hub, each capable of servicing multiple starships simultaneously. The station's hull reflected the light of the system's yellow star, making it appear almost organic against the void. For the colonial fleet, arriving at Starbase 12 3 days after the battle with the Cylons felt surreal. Captain Apollo had described it best during the approach. "It's like arriving at Pecan Fleet headquarters, except nobody's shooting at us, and the station isn't radioactive rubble." Admiral Adama stood in Galactica's observation deck, watching as the civilian ships of his fleet, battered freighters, passenger liners converted to refugee transports, mining vessels pressed into service as supply carriers, maneuvered toward designated docking berths under the guidance of Starfleet traffic control. Behind him, President Roslin reviewed data tablets containing preliminary reports from Federation officials who'd begun assessing the fleet's needs. Fuel, food, medical supplies, spare parts, Roslin read aloud, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who'd been negotiating non-stop for 72 hours. Starfleet Engineering estimates it will take 3 weeks to complete basic repairs to our most damaged ships. 3 weeks, Bill. When was the last time we had 3 weeks without running? Never, Adama replied simply, his eyes tracking a Federation workbee, a small utility craft, as it maneuvered toward one of the civilian freighters. Not since the attacks. We've been jumping every 33 minutes at times, running on fumes and prayers. The crew barely remembers what rest feels like." "The question," Rosalind said, setting down the data tablet and moving to stand beside him, "is what comes after those 3 weeks. We've accepted Federation assistance, but we can't stay here indefinitely. Our people need more than charity. They need a future, a home." The doors to the observation deck hissed open, and Captain Kirk entered with Commander Spock and Dr. McCoy. The 3 Starfleet officers had become regular fixtures aboard Galactica over the past 3 days, coordinating relief efforts and helping bridge the gap between colonial and Federation cultures. "Admiral, Madam President," Kirk greeted them. "I just finished speaking with Admiral Comac. The Federation Council has formally recognized the colonial fleet as a displaced population under Federation protection. They're fast-tracking emergency aid appropriations." "That's generous of them," Rosalind replied, her tone diplomatic but cautious. "What do they want in return?" Kirk's expression showed appreciation for her directness. "Honestly, information. The Council wants to understand how you arrived here, what the Cylons represent as a potential threat, and whether the dimensional rift could reopen. Starfleet Science Division is practically tripping over itself to study your FTL technology. The ability to jump without a warp drive raises some interesting theoretical questions." "In other words," Adama said, "they want to make sure we're not a threat and that we're not bringing trouble they can't handle." "Something like that," Kirk admitted, "though I should mention, not everyone on the Council is skeptical. Several members are arguing that the colonial fleet represents an unprecedented opportunity for cultural exchange, and that we have a moral obligation to help." Spock stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back in his characteristic pose. "Admiral, I have completed my analysis of the tactical data from our engagement with the Cylon forces. The results are troubling. The artificial intelligences demonstrated adaptive learning capabilities that exceed anything in Federation records. Their ability to coordinate hundreds of semi-autonomous units while maintaining strategic coherence suggests a level of computational sophistication that rivals or exceeds our own." "They've had decades to evolve," Adama replied. 40 years ago, they were clunky machines that could barely hold a rifle. Now they build ships, infiltrate societies, even create biological models that are indistinguishable from humans. They don't just want to destroy us. They want to replace us, to prove that artificial life is superior to organic life." McCoy shook his head, his expression troubled. "Creating biological models. You're telling me these machines can make artificial humans?" "Not artificial," Adama corrected. "Synthetic. Skin, blood, organs, all biologically real, grown in some kind of manufacturing process we don't fully understand. They even believe they have souls, that their genocide is somehow righteous. We've captured a few over the years. Interrogating them is unsettling. They genuinely believe they're the future of humanity, that we're the obsolete models. Fascinating and horrifying in equal measure," Spock observed. "The philosophical implications of artificial beings creating biological proxies to infiltrate and destroy their creators raises significant questions about the nature of consciousness and the ethics of artificial intelligence." "We can philosophize later, Spock," McCoy interjected. "Right now, I'm more concerned about the medical situation in that civilian fleet. I've been reviewing the health assessments, and it's worse than I thought. Malnutrition is endemic, psychological trauma is universal, and there are pregnant women aboard those ships who've been living on quarter rations for weeks. Rosalind's expression tightened. Doctor, we've been doing everything we can with the resources available. Our medical staff has performed miracles just keeping people alive. I know, Madam President, McCoy replied, his tone softening. I'm not criticizing your people. I'm saying you need help, and we can provide it. Starfleet Medical has already dispatched 3 hospital ships. They'll arrive within 48 hours with enough supplies to treat the entire colonial population. The observation deck's comm panel chirped, and Colonel Ty's voice came through. Admiral, you're needed in the CIC. We've got a situation. Adama and Kirk exchanged glances. Both men had heard enough situations in their careers to recognize genuine urgency. They moved as a unit toward the hatch, the others following close behind. The Combat Information Center was tense, but controlled when they arrived. Ty stood at the tactical table, studying data that had Lieutenant Gaeta looking distinctly worried. Captain Apollo stood nearby, still in his flight suit from a recent Viper patrol. Report, Adama commanded. Sir, we've detected unusual subspace emissions from the location where the dimensional rift closed, Gaeta explained, highlighting coordinates on the tactical display. Federation sensors are more sensitive than ours, so the Enterprise picked it up first and forwarded the data. The emissions are consistent with what we recorded when the rift was forming. Spock moved immediately to an auxiliary console, his fingers flying across the controls as he analyzed the data. The emission pattern suggests incipient spatial destabilization. If this trend continues, another dimensional breach could form within 72 hours. The Cylons, Apollo said flatly. They're trying to reopen the rift. They're coming after us. Kirk's jaw tightened. How is that possible? We watched that rift collapse. Your people said the dimensional barrier was restored. Apparently not permanently, Spock replied. The Cylons must have analyzed the initial rift formation and determined a method to recreate the conditions necessary for dimensional transit. Their computational capabilities would make such calculations feasible, particularly if they salvaged data from the destroyed base stars before the rift collapsed. Adama felt the familiar weight of command settle back onto his shoulders. 3 days. They'd had 3 days of something approaching safety. 3 days where his people could begin to believe they might actually survive. And now the Cylons were clawing their way back into this universe, relentless as always. Options? Adama said tersely. We could evacuate the area, Ty suggested. Jump the fleet to a different sector. Put distance between us and that rift before the Cylons arrive. Running is a short-term solution, Colonel, Spock countered. If the Cylons possess the capability to create dimensional rifts, they will eventually locate your fleet regardless of distance. The quantum signatures of your vessels are unique to your universe of origin. They would function as a homing beacon across dimensional boundaries. Then we destroy the rift before they can reopen it, Apollo proposed. Hit it with everything we've got. Colonial and Federation firepower combined. Destabilize it permanently. Kirk shook his head. That could work, or it could make things worse. Spock, what happens if we bombard a forming dimensional rift with high-energy weapons? The Vulcan's expression grew even more serious, which, for Spock, meant the situation was genuinely dire. The consequences would be unpredictable, Captain. We could successfully disrupt the formation, or we could catalyze a catastrophic spatial cascade that would tear open multiple rifts simultaneously. The risk is considerable. So we can't run effectively, and we can't blow it up without potentially making things worse. Roslin summarized. That leaves two options: fortify our position and prepare for another battle, or find a way to close the rift permanently using something other than brute force. Madam President, Spock said, one eyebrow rising. Your assessment is remarkably logical. A scientific approach would indeed be preferable to a military one in this scenario. The question becomes whether we possess sufficient understanding of dimensional mechanics to devise an effective countermeasure. Do we? Adama asked bluntly. Not currently, Spock admitted. However, I would note that we now have access to colonial FTL technology, which demonstrably functions across dimensional boundaries. If we could analyze the precise mechanism by which your jump drives interact with space-time, we might be able to develop a method to seal the dimensional barrier permanently. Gaeta looked up from his console, excitement breaking through his worry. Sir, the Enterprise Science Department has been studying our FTL systems since we arrived. They've been really careful, really respectful, not trying to steal technology or anything. But they've documented how our jump drives work. If Commander Spock needs that data, coordinate with him, Lieutenant, Adama ordered. Give him full access to our FTL specifications. If there's a chance to close that rift before the Cylons push through, we take it. Kirk activated his communicator. Kirk to Enterprise. Mr. Scott, I need you to coordinate with the Colonial Engineering team. We're looking at a dimensional mechanics problem, and I need your best people on it. The response came immediately in a thick Scottish brogue. Aye, Captain, though I'll tell ye, these colonial FTL drives are like nothing I've ever seen. They don't use warp fields at all. It's more like they're folding space itself. It's brilliant and terrifying at the same time. That's an accurate assessment, Mr. Scott, Spock interjected. I will be working with you directly. Please prepare the main deflector array for theoretical reconfiguration. We may need to generate a spatial inversion field. A spatial inversion field. Commander, that's not standard procedure. I'm not even sure the deflector can generate that kind of... Nevertheless, Mr. Scott, please begin preparations. Spock out. Apollo moved closer to his father, speaking quietly enough that only Adama could hear. Dad, even if they can close the rift permanently, what's to stop the Cylons from just creating another one? If Spock's right about them tracking us using quantum signatures, we're marked. They'll keep coming. I know, Lee, Adama replied, using his son's given name rather than his call sign. But we fight one battle at a time. Right now, that means stopping them from opening that rift. We'll deal with the next crisis when it arrives. The younger Adama nodded, though his expression remained troubled. The pilots are ready if it comes to combat, but we're down to 41 operational Vipers. We lost 2 during landing accidents while docking at the Starbase. The crews are exhausted. The birds need maintenance we haven't had time to perform. I'm aware of our status, Captain. Adama cut him off, not unkindly. Which is why we're going to do everything possible to avoid another direct engagement. But prepare your pilots anyway. If the Cylons break through before Spock closes that rift, we'll need every gun in space. Rosalind had been reviewing data on a tablet, but she looked up with a question. Captain Kirk, how many ships does Starfleet have in this sector? If we're preparing for a potential Cylon incursion, we should know what military assets are available. The Enterprise is the only Constitution-class ship within immediate response range, Kirk replied. There are 3 smaller vessels, the frigates Yorktown, Saladin, and Lexington, conducting survey operations about 6 hours away at maximum warp. I've already requested they converge on our position. Starbase 12 has defensive weapons, but it's primarily a logistics and repair facility, not a combat installation. So 4 Federation starships and 1 battered colonial battlestar, Ty summarized grimly, against however many base stars the Cylons can push through that rift. The Cylons lost 2 capital ships in the last engagement, Adama reminded him. That's not insignificant. They may be machines, but they still need time to build replacements, coordinate resources. They can't just materialize infinite ships. Unless they can, Apollo countered. We don't know what industrial capacity they have access to. For all we know, they've been building base stars constantly for the past 3 weeks, preparing for the moment they could reopen that rift. The observation was sobering, because it was entirely plausible. The Cylons had destroyed the 12 colonies with resources that suggested decades of hidden preparation. Manufacturing capability was one of their greatest advantages. They didn't need to train pilots, indoctrinate soldiers, or maintain morale. They just built more units and sent them into combat. Then we prepare for the worst-case scenario, Kirk decided. Admiral, I recommend we pool our resources. Colonial pilots have combat experience against the Cylons that my people lack. If you could provide tactical training to our security teams, coordinate joint combat protocols. Already underway, Adama replied. Colonel Ty has been working with your tactical officers since we arrived. Our combat doctrines are different, but the fundamentals translate. Your people learn fast. McCoy had been unusually quiet during the tactical discussion, but now he spoke up with obvious concern. Gentlemen, I understand the need for military preparation. But let's not lose sight of the 45,000 civilians in that fleet. If fighting breaks out, if the Cylons manage to push through that rift, those people are sitting targets. What's the evacuation plan? Rosalind answered before anyone else could. Doctor, there is no evacuation plan. If the Cylons break through, if we can't stop them, those 45,000 people die. That's the reality we've been living with since the attacks. Every time we jump, every time we fight, we know that failure means extinction. There's no fallback position, no reinforcements waiting in reserve. We either win, or we cease to exist. The brutal honesty of her statement silenced the room. Kirk looked shaken, not by fear, but by the crushing weight of responsibility that Rosalind and Adama carried every moment. Command was one thing. Being responsible for the absolute survival of an entire species was something else entirely. Then we make sure you win, Kirk said firmly. Spock, how long do you need to develop a solution for closing that rift? Unknown, Captain, Spock replied with characteristic precision. The theoretical framework is complex, and the engineering implementation will require precise calibration. However, I estimate that with full cooperation from Colonial and Federation engineering staff, a working solution could be devised within 48 hours. We have 72 hours before the rift potentially reopens, Gaeta noted. That gives us 24 hours of buffer if everything goes perfectly. Tai snorted. In my experience, nothing ever goes perfectly. Then we'll adapt, Adama said with finality. Mr. Spock, you have full authority to requisition whatever personnel or equipment you need from Galactica. Chief Tyrol will coordinate with your engineering teams. Captain Kirk, I suggest we establish a joint command structure, unified tactical response if the Cylons arrive before we're ready. Agreed, Kirk replied. We'll coordinate from Galactica's CIC. Your tactical systems are impressive, and your crew knows how to fight these things. The tactical planning continued for another 30 minutes. Deployment of Vipers and Federation shuttlecraft, positioning of ships to maximize defensive coverage, contingency protocols if the rift opened prematurely. It was the kind of detailed, grinding work that separated professional military forces from amateurs. Endless scenarios, backup plans for the backup plans, coordinating communication frequencies and identification protocols. Finally, Adama called an end to the session. We have our assignments. Dismissed. As the various officers filed out to begin their tasks, Kirk lingered behind with Adama and Roslin. His expression was thoughtful, almost philosophical. Admiral, Madam President, I've been thinking about something. If we manage to close this rift permanently, if we cut off the Cylons' access to this universe, what then? You'll be stranded here, separated from your home universe forever. Is that really what you want? Adama considered the question carefully. Captain, our home universe contains nothing but radioactive ruins and an enemy that wants us dead. The 12 colonies are gone. Everyone we knew outside this fleet is dead. The universe we came from holds only ghosts and Cylons. So, yes, if closing that rift means we're stranded here, but safe from the machines that destroyed our civilization, I can live with that trade, Roslin added quietly. We've been searching for Earth, a new home for humanity. If your Federation's Earth can't accept us, we'll keep searching. But at least we'll be searching in a universe where we're not the last remnants of a dead civilization, where we're not alone against genocidal machines. That's worth being cut off from a universe that holds nothing for us anymore. Kirk nodded slowly, understanding the calculus of survival that both leaders had internalized. For what it's worth, I'll do everything I can to ensure the Federation Council approves permanent settlement for your people. It won't be easy. Bureaucracy never is. But I believe we can make it happen. Thank you, Captain, Roslin said. Though I should mention, we're not looking for handouts or charity. The colonial people are skilled, educated, experienced. We have engineers, doctors, teachers, farmers. We want to contribute, not just survive. I don't doubt it, Kirk replied, with genuine warmth. You've already taught my crew more about combat tactics in 3 days than they learned in a year at the Academy. That's the kind of expertise the Federation values. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent comm from the CIC. It was Gaeta, and his voice carried unmistakable alarm. Admiral, the subspace emissions just spiked dramatically. Commander Spock's 72-hour estimate was wrong. The rift is opening now." Adama and Kirk were moving before Gaeta finished speaking, racing back toward the CIC with Roslin close behind. The crisis they'd been planning for had arrived ahead of schedule, and now they would discover whether Federation and colonial forces could stand together against an enemy that had already destroyed one universe's humanity. As they reached the CIC, the main view screen showed the region of space where the original rift had closed, and there, tearing through the fabric of reality like a wound in space itself, a new dimensional portal was forming. Larger than before, more stable, pulsing with energy that suggested something massive was preparing to emerge. "All hands to battle stations," Adama commanded, his voice carrying the calm that came from decades of command. "Launch all Vipers. Get the civilian fleet moving to fallback coordinates. This is not a drill." Kirk activated his communicator. "Kirk to all Starfleet vessels in range. Red alert. Unknown hostiles inbound through dimensional rift. All ships converge on these coordinates. We're going to need everything we've got." On the view screen, the rift expanded further, and through its shimmering surface, massive shapes began to materialize. Not 2 base stars this time. 6. The Cylons had learned from their defeat. They weren't taking chances anymore. They were bringing overwhelming force to ensure that this time, the colonial fleet, the last remnant of humanity from their universe, would be utterly destroyed. And standing between 45,000 civilians and mechanical genocide were 1 Battlestar, 4 Federation starships, and a handful of warriors who refused to accept that extinction was inevitable. The battle for survival in a new universe was about to begin in earnest. The dimensional rift tore open like a wound in space itself, reality bleeding exotic radiation as 6 Cylon base stars materialized through the breach. Each Y-shaped vessel was a kilometer of networked death, their hulls bristling with weapons batteries and launch tubes already disgorging raiders by the hundreds. The Cylons had come prepared for total war, and the mechanical precision of their deployment spoke to one terrifying truth. They had analyzed every second of the previous engagement and adapted accordingly. "Gods," Colonel Ty breathed, watching the tactical display populate with hostile contacts. 6 capital ships. They're not here to raid. They're here to finish us. Admiral Adama stood at the center of Galactica's Combat Information Center, his weathered face impassive despite the impossible odds materializing before them. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency, the controlled chaos of a warship transitioning to combat readiness flowing through every deck and compartment. "All batteries, confirm ready status," Adama commanded. "Kaja, what's our Viper status?" Captain Apollo's voice crackled over the comm from the flight deck. 41 birds in the black, all pilots reporting ready. We're forming defensive screen around the civilian fleet. Dad, Admiral, those are a lot of raiders. We're going to be outnumbered at least 10 to 1. "Then make every shot count, Captain," Adama replied. "Remember your training. Cylons are predictable once you understand their patterns. Use that against them." On the view screen, the USS Enterprise moved into position alongside Galactica, her shields already shimmering at maximum power. The 3 other Federation vessels, Yorktown, Saladin, and Lexington, had arrived within the past hour, and now took up supporting positions, forming a defensive perimeter that looked desperately thin against the Cylon armada. Captain Kirk's voice came through the open channel, steady despite the odds. "All Federation vessels, this is Captain Kirk. We're facing an enemy that has already committed genocide against billions. They don't negotiate, they don't retreat, and they won't stop until every human in that colonial fleet is dead. Today, we show them that humanity, regardless of what universe we come from, doesn't surrender. Kirk out." President Roslin stood at the edge of the CIC, her face pale but composed. She'd insisted on remaining aboard Galactica, despite Adama's suggestion that she evacuate to one of the civilian ships moving toward fallback coordinates. Her reasoning had been simple and unarguable. If the fleet's military commander was staying to fight, the civilian leader couldn't be seen running. "Madam President," Lieutenant Duwala called from communications. "The civilian fleet is requesting instructions. Several ship captains are asking if they should prepare for immediate jump." Roslin moved to the comm station, her voice clear and strong when she activated the fleet-wide channel. "This is President Roslin. All civilian vessels are to continue moving to fallback coordinates as directed. Do not jump unless Admiral Adama gives the explicit order. We have allies fighting alongside us. The United Federation of Planets has chosen to stand with us in our darkest hour. Have faith. Stay strong. We will survive this. Roslin out." The speech was brief, but it carried weight. Across the fleet, in cramped corridors and converted cargo holds where refugees huddled together, people listened and found something to hold on to. Not certainty of victory. They'd lost that luxury when their worlds burned. But the stubborn human refusal to accept inevitable defeat. Commander Spock had taken position at a science station, his Vulcan features set in concentration as he analyzed the dimensional rift's energy signature. Dr. McCoy stood nearby, his medical tricorder forgotten as he watched the Cylon fleet deployment with barely concealed horror. "Spock," McCoy said quietly, "please tell me you have some kind of scientific miracle ready to deploy, because from where I'm standing, we're about to get slaughtered." "I am detecting irregularities in the rift's quantum matrix, Doctor," Spock replied, without looking up from his console. "The Cylons forced the dimensional breach open prematurely, likely because they detected our presence and feared we might develop countermeasures. The rift is unstable. If we could exploit that instability." "Exploit it how?" Adama demanded, moving to Spock's station. "Commander, I need actionable intelligence, not theoretical possibilities." Spock's fingers danced across the controls, pulling up data streams that combined colonial Dratus readings with Federation sensor analysis. "Admiral, the rift's structural integrity is dependent on a continuous energy feed from the Cylon side. I am detecting a specific emission pattern originating from one of the base stars, the central vessel in their formation. My analysis suggests that particular ship is functioning as an anchor point, maintaining the dimensional passage." Understanding dawned in Adama's eyes. "If we destroy that ship, the rift collapses." "Theoretically, yes," Spock confirmed. "However, the Cylons will have anticipated such a strategy. The anchor vessel will be heavily defended, and any direct assault would require penetrating their entire formation." "Then we create an opening," Kirk said, having moved to join the conversation. His command experience showed in the tactical assessment forming behind his eyes. A coordinated strike, Colonial and Federation forces, hitting them from multiple vectors simultaneously. Force them to split their attention. Create confusion in their network. That assumes their network can be confused. Ty interjected skeptically. These things coordinate thousands of units simultaneously. They process information faster than we can even detect it. But they're not infallible, Adama countered. We've beaten them before by being unpredictable, by making choices that don't follow pure tactical logic. Commander Spock, can the Enterprise target that anchor ship with photon torpedoes? Affirmative, Admiral. However, the range is extreme, and the base star will have countermeasures in place. I estimate a 63% probability of successful weapon delivery, assuming optimal firing conditions. I'll take 63%, Kirk said immediately. Better odds than we had at the Kobayashi Maru scenario. McCoy shook his head. Jim, that was a training simulation. This is real, and those odds mean there's a 37% chance we fail, and those machines kill everyone. I'm aware of the mathematics, Bones, Kirk replied, his tone harder than usual. But we're not abandoning these people, not while Enterprise has power, and I have a crew willing to fight. The moment of strategizing was shattered as Lieutenant Gaeta's voice cut through the CIC with urgent alarm. Raiders breaking formation. They're accelerating toward our position. Looks like they're targeting the civilian fleet. On the tactical display, hundreds of red contacts detached from the Battlestar formation, arrowing toward the defensively positioned civilian ships like a swarm of mechanical locusts. The Cylons weren't interested in a prolonged military engagement. They were going straight for the civilians, forcing Galactica and the Federation vessels to respond or watch helpless refugees die. Vipers, engage those raiders, Apollo commanded over the tactical net, his voice tight with controlled fury. Don't let them through. What followed was aerial combat on a scale that defied comprehension. 41 Colonial Vipers dove into a swarm of over 300 Cylon raiders, their pilots executing maneuvers that seemed to violate physics itself. Captain Starbuck Thrace led her squadron through the enemy formation in a diving attack that destroyed 6 raiders in as many seconds, her wingmen following her into impossible angles of attack that only desperation and skill could achieve. But skill wasn't enough, not against these odds. Apollo to Galactica! We're getting massacred out here. There's too many of them. The Enterprise responded before Adama could issue orders. Phaser banks opened fire with surgical precision, ruby beams lancing through space to vaporize raiders that were targeting overwhelmed Vipers. The other Federation vessels added their firepower, creating a devastating crossfire that tore through the Cylon swarm. Mr. Sulu, Kirk commanded over the comm. Pattern Delta 7, wide dispersal phaser fire. Cover those Colonial fighters. Aye, Captain. Implementing now. The Enterprise's phaser array shifted to rapid-fire mode, sweeping through the raider formation like a scythe through wheat. The precision of Federation targeting systems, computers that could track hundreds of targets simultaneously and calculate firing solutions faster than biological reflexes, turned the battle into a shooting gallery. Raiders exploded by the dozens, their hulls unable to withstand directed energy weapons that could reduce asteroids to vapor. But the Cylons adapted. They always adapted. The base stars, recognizing that their raiders were being systematically destroyed, shifted tactics. Instead of continuing the swarm attack, they concentrated their fire on the Enterprise, plasma weapons hammering the Federation starship's shields with devastating intensity. "Captain, shields are dropping rapidly." Lieutenant Uhura's voice came through Kirk's communicator, stress evident despite her professional composure. "We're down to 40% and falling. Evasive maneuvers, full impulse," Kirk ordered. "Mr. Scott, reroute all available power to forward shields." "I'm giving her all she's got, Captain." The Scottish engineer's voice carried both determination and desperation. "But these Cylon weapons are unlike anything we've encountered. They're specifically designed to overwhelm energy barriers." Adama watched the battle unfold on the tactical display, decades of combat experience processing the flow of the engagement. The Cylons were executing a classic hammer and anvil strategy: pin the most dangerous opponent with concentrated fire, while using numerical superiority to overwhelm the defenders. It was effective, brutal, and entirely predictable, which meant it could be countered. "Colonel Tai," Adama said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos of the CIC. "Prepare for emergency combat jump. Coordinates, point-blank range with the anchor base star. We're going to give Captain Kirk his opening." Ty's head snapped around. "Bill, that's suicide. We'll be inside their formation with 6 base stars targeting us simultaneously." "We'll be there for exactly 30 seconds, Adama replied. "Long enough to hit that anchor ship with everything we've got. Long enough to destabilize the rift, and long enough for Kirk to deliver his torpedoes. Then we jump out before they can coordinate a response." "Admiral," Spock interjected, his Vulcan calm somehow making the words more ominous. "Colonel Ty's assessment is accurate. The probability of Galactica surviving such an engagement is less than 40%, even if you successfully damage the anchor vessel. The remaining base stars will have ample time to destroy your ship before you can complete your second jump. Then we make those 30 seconds count," Adama said with finality. He turned to face Kirk directly. "Captain, when we jump in, you'll have one opportunity to deliver those torpedoes. The anchor ship will be focused on Galactica. We'll be the most immediate threat. That's your window. Don't miss." Kirk met Adama's eyes, and something passed between them, the silent understanding of commanders who knew they were asking their crews to walk into hell. "We won't miss, Admiral. You have my word." "Then let's end this," Adama said. He moved to his command chair, settling into it with the weight of absolute decision. "All hands, this is the Admiral. Prepare for combat jump. When we exit FTL, we will be in close proximity to enemy capital ships. All gun batteries will fire on my command. Damage control teams, stand by for hull breaches. This is going to be rough." President Roslin stepped forward, placing a hand on Adama's shoulder. "Bill, when this is over, Madam President, we'll finally have time to rest," Adama interrupted gently. "But right now, I need you to move to the Auxiliary Command Center. If the CIC is hit, the fleet needs leadership." Roslin wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes, but political instinct warred with pragmatism, and lost. "Good hunting, Admiral." As she departed with her aide, Adama activated the fleet-wide channel. "All colonial vessels, all Federation ships, this is Admiral Adama. In approximately 90 seconds. Galactica will execute an emergency combat jump into the heart of the Cylon formation. When we do, the enemy will concentrate fire on us. Use that opportunity. Hit them with everything you have. Protect the civilian fleet. And remember, we've survived the end of our worlds. We've crossed dimensions to find hope in a universe we never knew existed. We will not die here. Not today. Not ever. Adama out. On the view screen, the Cylon base stars continued their relentless advance, their raiders swirling through space in patterns of mechanical precision. They were machines that knew no fear, no doubt, no mercy. They had destroyed the 12 colonies. They had hunted humanity across the stars. They believed victory was inevitable because they could not conceive of their own fallibility. They were about to learn differently. "Helm," Adama commanded. "Execute jump." Reality twisted. The fundamental forces that bound matter together strained as Galactica's FTL drive tore a hole through space-time, translating the massive Battlestar's mass across distance that should have required minutes to traverse, depositing her precisely where Lieutenant Gaeta's calculations predicted. Less than 2 kilometers from the central base star, the anchor vessel maintaining the dimensional rift. For exactly 1 heartbeat, the Cylons were caught completely unprepared. Their distributed intelligence, for all its computational speed, required microseconds to process the impossible. A capital ship materializing inside their formation, all weapons hot, already firing. That heartbeat was all Galactica needed. "Fire!" Adama roared. Every gun on Galactica's port side unleashed hell simultaneously. Railguns hurled tungsten slugs at relativistic velocities, each round carrying kinetic energy equivalent to tactical nuclear weapons. Point defense cannons stitched lines of tracer fire across the base star's hull. Missiles launched in rippling volleys, their shaped charges designed specifically to penetrate Cylon armor. The anchor base star staggered under the onslaught. Its hull ruptured in dozens of locations, venting atmosphere and debris. Internal explosions cascaded through its structure as colonial ordnance found critical systems. The vessel tried to return fire, its weapons tracking toward Galactica, but too slowly, too late. And then the Enterprise added her voice to the fury. 6 photon torpedoes, antimatter weapons that represented the pinnacle of Federation military technology, crossed the distance to the crippled base star in seconds. They impacted with precision that suggested Spock had personally calculated every firing solution, each torpedo finding a weak point that colonial guns had already compromised. The explosions were beautiful and terrible, antimatter meeting matter in perfect annihilation, converting mass directly to energy according to Einstein's elegant equation. The anchor base star didn't just die, it ceased to exist, its central structure vaporizing in an expanding sphere of plasma that consumed the surrounding sections. The effect on the dimensional rift was immediate and catastrophic. Without the anchor vessel's energy feed, the quantum matrix destabilized. The rift began contracting, its edges flickering with exotic radiation as space-time tried to seal the wound in reality. "It's working," Gaeta shouted from his station. "The rift is collapsing." But the Cylons weren't finished. The 5 remaining base stars, recognizing the threat Galactica represented, redirected their full attention to the colonial Battlestar. Plasma weapons converged from multiple vectors, and for a terrible moment, Adama thought they'd waited too long to jump out. The Enterprise and her sister ships threw themselves into the breach. The 4 Federation vessels positioned themselves between Galactica and the Cylon formation, their shields absorbing punishment meant for the Battlestar. It was a sacrifice play, trading their defensive integrity to buy Adama time. Shields failing on Yorktown, Uhura's voice carried across the comm channels. Saladin reports hull breaches on decks 4 and 5. All Federation vessels fall back to secondary positions, Kirk commanded. Admiral Adama, get your ship out of there. Jump coordinates calculated, Gaeta reported, his young face tight with concentration. Ready on your order, Admiral. Adama watched the tactical display, saw the Cylons repositioning, saw the Federation ships taking damage to protect his Battlestar, saw the dimensional rift contracting, but not yet closed. 30 seconds, he'd promised. They'd been in the kill zone for 28. Execute jump, Adama commanded. Now! Galactica vanished in a flash of blue light, reappearing 5,000 kilometers away, outside the immediate combat zone, but still able to provide fire support. The sudden disappearance of their primary target caused a moment of confusion in the Cylon network. Not long, just a few seconds as they recalculated, but enough for the dimensional rift to collapse completely. The quantum breach sealed itself with a final pulse of exotic radiation, and suddenly, the 5 remaining Cylon base stars were cut off from their universe of origin. No reinforcements, no resupply, no retreat. They were stranded in enemy territory, outnumbered by the combined might of the Colonial Fleet and Federation Starfleet, their primary mission, keeping the dimensional passage open, a failure. And for the first time since the genocidal attack on the 12 colonies, the Cylons faced a choice that their rigid logic circuits had never anticipated. Adapt to a strategic defeat, or be destroyed trying to complete an impossible objective. The Cylon formation hesitated. Not long, machines processed decisions far faster than organics, but long enough for every human watching to recognize what they were seeing: uncertainty. The artificial intelligences that had destroyed billions, that had pursued the colonial fleet across dimensional boundaries, that had never retreated or surrendered in living memory, were reconsidering their tactical position. "They're pulling back," Ty said, disbelief evident in his voice. "The base stars are moving away from our position." "Confirm that," Adama ordered sharply. "Gaeta, what are they doing?" "Sir, the base stars are collecting their remaining raiders and withdrawing toward the outer system," Gaeta reported, his fingers dancing across his console. They're leaving." Captain Kirk's voice came through the open channel, equally surprised. "Admiral, are we seeing this correctly? The Cylons are retreating." "They're adapting," Adama replied, watching the tactical display with the wariness of someone who'd fought these machines for too long to trust any apparent victory. "They can't reopen the rift. They're cut off from their resources, and they've lost their numerical advantage. For the first time, the tactical calculus doesn't favor continued engagement. They're withdrawing to reassess, regroup, and develop a new strategy." "So we won?" McCoy asked, his voice carrying hope mixed with exhaustion. "We survived, Doctor," Adama corrected. "That's not the same as winning. Those 5 base stars are still operational, still dangerous, and still committed to humanity's extinction. They'll be back. But for today, for this moment, yes, we survived." Across the fleet, the realization began to sink in. The dimensional rift was closed. The Cylons had retreated. The 45,000 refugees were still alive, still intact, still fighting. Cheers erupted on Galactica's CIC, spreading through the ship as word filtered through the decks. President Roslin returned to the command deck, her composure cracking just enough to show relief. Admiral, casualty reports. Minimal on Galactica, Ty reported. 3 wounded, no fatalities. Hull damage is manageable. The Vipers took losses. We're down to 37 operational birds. The civilian fleet reports no damage. Federation vessels sustained more significant damage, Kirk added, his tone sobering. Yorktown lost shields completely and took hull damage. Saladin has casualties, 12 wounded, 2 dead. They put themselves between us and the Cylons, Madam President. They took hits meant for colonial ships. Roslin's expression shifted to something approaching grief. 2 dead. Captain Kirk, those people died protecting refugees from another universe. I don't have words adequate for that sacrifice. They died doing what Starfleet officers do, Kirk replied simply. Protecting those who can't protect themselves, defending the principle that all sentient life has value, regardless of origin. It's what we're trained for, Madam President. It's what we believe in. Commander Spock had been analyzing the rift's final collapse, and he looked up from his station with his characteristic Vulcan composure restored. Admiral, Madam President. Captain, the dimensional barrier has been successfully sealed. My analysis indicates the quantum matrix has stabilized at pre-rift levels. Without access to colonial FTL technology and extremely precise spatial coordinates, recreating the breach would require computational resources that exceed even Cylon capabilities. Barring unforeseen developments, the dimensional passage is permanently closed. Permanently, Adama repeated, letting the word settle. Meaning we can't go back even if we wanted to. Correct, Admiral, Spock confirmed. The colonial fleet is now indigenous to this universe. From a legal and philosophical standpoint, you have been granted an unexpected form of asylum. The observation, delivered with pure Vulcan logic, somehow crystallized the magnitude of what had just occurred. The colonial fleet, the last remnant of humanity from a dead universe, had been cut off completely from their origin. Everything they'd known, everyone they'd lost, every world they'd called home, existed now only in memory and in a universe they could never reach again. But they were alive, and they weren't alone. Captain Kirk, Adama said formally, moving to stand directly before the Federation officer. On behalf of the colonial fleet and the people we represent, I want to thank you and your crew. You didn't have to stand with us. The Cylons were our enemy, our burden. You could have reported our presence to your superiors and let them decide our fate. Instead, you fought beside us. You risked your ship and your crew for people you'd never met. That's more than we had any right to expect. Kirk extended his hand, and Adama took it. Admiral, I told you before, the Federation doesn't turn away people in need. You've proven over these past few days that humanity, your humanity, is worth preserving, worth fighting for. You've shown courage, resilience, and a refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds. Those are qualities the Federation values above all others. What happens now? Roslin asked, the practical political question cutting through the moment of mutual respect. The Cylons are still out there. They're stranded in this universe, but they're not defeated. And the colonial fleet still needs a home, a place where we can rebuild. Now, Kirk replied, we deal with bureaucracy. I've already transmitted a full report to Starfleet Command, including tactical data on the Cylons and a formal request for asylum consideration for your fleet. The Federation Council will need to review the situation, conduct hearings, debate the implications. It will take time. How much time? Adama asked. Weeks, possibly months, Kirk admitted. The Federation moves slowly on major policy decisions. There will be factions that argue against accepting refugees from another dimension, concerns about resource allocation, debates about the Prime Directive's applicability. Politics. So we wait, Tai said, frustration evident. We sit in this starbase, dependent on Federation charity, while politicians debate whether we deserve to exist. Colonel, Spock interjected, I would note that the Federation's deliberative process, while time-consuming, exists precisely to ensure that decisions affecting billions of lives are made thoughtfully rather than hastily. Your frustration is understandable. But the alternative, authoritarian efficiency without democratic oversight, typically produces outcomes that rational beings find objectionable. Roslin actually smiled at that. Commander Spock, you just described our political situation perfectly. Democracy is messy, slow, and frustrating. But it's also what separates us from the Cylons, who make decisions with perfect efficiency and perfect cruelty. I'll take messy democracy every time. A logical perspective, Madam President, Spock acknowledged with what might have been the ghost of approval. The tactical display showed the Cylon base stars continuing their withdrawal, moving beyond the system's heliopause, disappearing into the void. They weren't destroyed, but they were scattered, uncertain, forced to adapt to circumstances their creators had never programmed them to handle. They'll be back, Apollo said, having returned from the flight deck after securing his Vipers. His flight suit was soaked with sweat, and exhaustion showed in every line of his body. But his voice was firm. The Cylons always come back. They'll analyze this defeat, develop new strategies, find ways to hurt us we haven't imagined yet. Then we'll be ready, Adama replied. Because now we have something we haven't had since the attacks. Time. Time to repair our ships, resupply our fleet, train our people. Time to learn about this universe and how to survive in it. And time to work with our new allies to develop defenses against an enemy we now understand better than anyone else in this dimension. Kirk nodded. The Federation will want to study the Cylons, understand their capabilities and vulnerabilities, your combat data, your tactical experience. That's valuable intelligence, and it gives us leverage with the Council. The colonial fleet isn't just refugees seeking asylum. Your experienced military forces with knowledge of a potential threat to Federation security. That matters. You're suggesting we trade military intelligence for political support, Roslin observed, her political instincts immediately grasping the dynamic. I'm suggesting, Kirk replied carefully, that we emphasize how the colonial fleet's presence benefits the Federation as much as it benefits your people. Mutual advantage tends to make bureaucratic approval much easier. The conversation continued, planning next steps, coordinating repair schedules, arranging for the Federation medical teams to begin treating colonial civilians. It was tedious, necessary work, the unglamorous aftermath of survival that never made it into the heroic stories. But as Adama watched his officers working alongside Federation personnel, as he saw Colonial and Starfleet crew members sharing technical data and tactical assessments with the easy camaraderie of professionals who'd fought together, he felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks. Not hope. Hope was still too fragile, too easily destroyed. But possibility. The possibility that the Colonial Fleet's journey through darkness was approaching something that resembled a destination. The possibility that 45,000 refugees might find not just survival, but a future. The possibility that humanity, scattered across dimensions, divided by impossible distance, had rediscovered something essential. That when faced with extinction, when confronted by enemies that sought to erase them from existence, humans didn't surrender. They adapted, they fought, they found allies in the most unexpected places, and built something new from the ashes of what they'd lost. Admiral William Adama looked at the tactical display one final time, at the retreating Cylon signatures, at the Federation vessels maintaining protective positions around his fleet, at the thousands of civilian ships that still carried the last remnants of the 12 colonies. "Colonel Tai," he said quietly, "stand down from combat alert, set condition 2 throughout the ship, and tell the crew, tell them they fought well today. Tell them I'm proud of them. Tell them we survived." Tai nodded, understanding the weight those simple words carried. "Aye, Admiral. They'll appreciate hearing it from you." As the CIC began the process of transitioning from combat operations to standard duty, as the adrenaline faded and exhaustion started to reassert itself, Adama allowed himself one moment of genuine relief. They had survived the fall of their civilization. They had crossed dimensional boundaries. They had found allies who believed in more than survival, who believed in principles worth fighting for. The war wasn't over. The Cylons would return. The bureaucratic battles with the Federation Council were just beginning. The search for a permanent home would take time, effort, and negotiations that would test everyone's patience. But today, in this moment, the Colonial Fleet was alive, intact, and no longer alone in the universe. For people who'd watched their worlds burn, who'd lost everything but each other and their determination to survive, that was enough. That was everything. Conclusion: 3 months after the Battle of the Dimensional Rift, as it came to be known in both Colonial and Federation records, the United Federation of Planets Council voted to grant the Colonial Fleet provisional asylum status. The vote wasn't unanimous. Concerns about resource allocation and the precedent of accepting interdimensional refugees generated considerable debate. But ultimately, the Federation's foundational principles won out. Humanity, regardless of its origin universe, deserved protection and the opportunity to rebuild. The Colonial Fleet settled initially near Starbase 12, but within a year, the Federation Council designated an entire world for colonial settlement, New Caprica, an M-class planet in a lightly populated sector that offered agricultural potential and room for growth. 45,000 refugees began the process of building a new civilization, carrying with them the memories of the 12 colonies and the determination to ensure their culture survived. The 5 Cylon basis stars that had been stranded in the Federation universe proved to be an ongoing concern. They attacked sporadically, testing defenses, probing for weaknesses, attempting to develop new strategies for completing their genocidal mission. But they never again possessed the overwhelming advantage they'd enjoyed in their home universe. Federation technology, combined with colonial tactical experience, created a defensive paradigm the Cylons struggled to counter. Over time, Joint Colonial Federation task forces hunted down the stranded base stars one by one. The battles were brutal, costly, and ultimately successful. The final Cylon capital ship was destroyed 4 years after the dimensional rift closed, ending the threat from that particular enemy. But the Cylons had taught both civilizations valuable lessons about artificial intelligence, about the dangers of creating synthetic life without considering the philosophical implications, about the responsibilities creators bore toward their creations. Those lessons would shape Federation policy on AI development for generations. Admiral William Adama eventually retired from active service, spending his final years on New Caprica, watching a new generation grow up free from the shadow of genocide. President Laura Roslin served 3 terms as the colonial government's leader, negotiating the delicate balance between maintaining colonial identity and integrating with Federation culture. Captain James T. Kirk received a commendation for his handling of the first contact situation, though the report also contained a note of mild reprimand for exceeding his authority in committing Federation resources without explicit authorization. Kirk filed the commendation alongside dozens of others that followed similar patterns throughout his legendary career. The dimensional rift itself remained closed, the barrier between universes sealed. Colonial scientists and Federation researchers occasionally studied the phenomenon, hoping to understand the mechanics that had allowed cross-dimensional transit. But they never attempted to reopen the passage. Some doors, once closed, should remain that way. The colonial refugees never forgot where they came from. The 12 colonies lived on in stories, traditions, and the collective memory of a people who had survived the unimaginable. But they also embraced their new home, contributing to the Federation in ways both expected and surprising. Colonial pilots flew Federation vessels. Colonial engineers designed new technologies. Colonial teachers shared their history with children who would never see the worlds their grandparents had called home. 2 universes had collided through a tear in reality, and from that collision came something neither had anticipated. Proof that humanity's greatest strength lay not in technology or military might, but in its capacity to adapt, to survive, and to build something new even when everything seemed lost. The Battlestar Galactica, that gray fortress that had carried humanity through its darkest hour, was eventually decommissioned and converted into a museum. Visitors from across the Federation came to walk her corridors, to see the CIC where desperate decisions had preserved civilization, to understand the price of survival. And on clear nights on New Caprica, when 2 moons hung in an alien sky, the survivors of the 12 colonies would sometimes look up at the stars and remember. They would remember the worlds they'd lost, the people they'd mourned, the impossible journey through darkness that had brought them here. But they would also see the future, their children playing in streets free from fear, their culture thriving in a new home, their existence proof that even in humanity's darkest moments, extinction was never inevitable. The war had been terrible, the losses had been catastrophic, the journey had tested every limit of human endurance, but humanity, fragile, persistent, impossible humanity, had survived, and in surviving, had discovered that the universe, for all its darkness, still contained the possibility of hope.